I'm just going to give you a little heads up. When you talk to the rabbi, think about what you're saying. I went up to him at the end of Rosh Hashanah Day services and said, Rabbi, I've been thinking about missing the mark. And maybe next year I could do something about that. And he said, what do you mean next year? So he volunteered me. So just as a little heads up, when you start talking about ideas, you could be up here too. Also, I want to dedicate this drosh to my beautiful bride. We're celebrating 40 years today. Without her, I would be nothing. So we're going to talk a little bit about missing the mark. We missed the mark again. We missed the mark again. Every year we've missed the mark. I begin to wonder if we ever hit the mark. We talk about sinning when we recite the Vidui, all 22 of the sins against God and or our fellow human beings. We pound our chests. I'm not saying we haven't done harm physically or mentally or emotionally. We are human. We're all fallible. But I also believe we have hit the mark. I know many of you volunteer with a number of nonprofits and donate goods and dollars to many worthy causes. Our own Cy Lentz, who we're so proud of, was named the Sonoma Alcalde for his numerous contributions to our community. Our Hesed committee, with our membership, have contributed to many local organizations and demonstrated every year at this time when we support a group. And this year we're supporting Sonoma Overnight Shelter. Our own rabbi, who does so many things here for our community, but he also heads the Sonoma Ministerial Association and a show on KSVY radio, he donates countless hours to the religious community. Yes, all of us believe and are commanded to do tikkun olam and demonstrate that value through our actions. My hope is we can evolve as a religion to recognize that we as people have the capacity not only to sin, but to do positive contributions for our families, for our friends, for our communities, and for our world. All of our kings and prophets did miraculous deeds and also sinned. We are all a mixed bag. We have the capacity to correct our ways. Our high holy days are the time given to us to reflect on the past year, to do an accounting. I would like to see an accounting to have both debits as well as credits. I would like God, Adonai, to see the good as well as the ways in which we can improve ourselves. It's easy to be a critic, but I think we can have a more balanced picture. It's called positive reinforcement. Let us assess not only the ways in which we were hurtful, but also the ways in which we gave of ourselves and give ourselves a little pat on the back for hitting the mark. Can we create a prayer that says, thank you for making the world a better place? And with that, a commitment to continue to do good deeds. Can we thank each other for living tikkun olam? Although there maybe there's another reason why we are so critical of ourselves. Maybe this criticalness developed as a survival instinct. Wherever we have landed as a people, we face persecution. Our survival depended on us having to be extremely adaptive. We had to be exceptionally good at whatever we had to become to survive. Whether it be as a tinker, a silver or a goldsmith, a doctor, an entrepreneur, as we were denied access at times to owning property or denied access to certain professions. We all know about Jewish guilt. What do you mean you're not becoming a doctor? When was the last time you called? This critical trait could have been handed down as a cultural norm through our religion. The vidui may have served a dual purpose. We know that Jews represent 0.2% of the world's population and represent 20% of Nobel Prize winners. This may be a wild theory, but it may have some credence. The bottom line is we as humans are capable of the most incredible generosity and kindness and of the most heinous behavior. I would like, in reflecting on the past year, to look at both sides. I'm not saying do away with repentance or the vidui, but what I am saying is reinforce the good and pledge to improve the ways we have transgressed. This will make a better person of all of us and spur us on to being a more giving and loving human being. I hope you're having an easy fast. Gamar Chatima Tova. I'm not going anywhere.
About 15 minutes, we can open up this conversation on any part of Reb Avram's Drashonet, his little drash, or you want to elaborate, or maybe a spark, anything? I enjoyed the ruach, the spirit of that.
Something you said brings forth the recognition that we see this also in the Moshe story, in the Moses story. Missing the mark often just seems like a much bigger deal than getting it right. In the same way that it might take a month to build a house, but it takes a few minutes to burn it down.
Mm-hmm.
So there seems to be this apparent intensity and heaviness to our mistakes, and the grief, because we're so aware of how fragile all of this is. So it just brings awareness of that, and I guess to internalize the journey of getting it right is different than the journey of missing the mark, in the sense that missing the mark is more of a forgetting what's true. And so the intensity of the forgetting, the intensity of the missing the mark imprints potentially a deep awareness of, that's not what I want. That's not who I want to be. And so it's more of an elimination. Like, okay, here's a thought, an element of my inner being that is not working. I need to get to the core of this, right? It's more of an elimination process. And then the getting it right is not so much that's original. Like missing the mark's derivative.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's what happens when you're not in truth, but being in truth isn't its own. It's what happens when we're not getting in the way of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So if that made sense, just some thoughts that came up.
Thank you.
So while Ari was talking, something came to mind, kind of combining both what Avram was teaching and what Ari was just now sharing. Kind of a hello moment for me. Missing the mark implies that you were aiming for the mark in the first place. And so often we don't. So it cannot be called missing the mark. I was never aiming for the mark. My intentions were not towards the mark. I had less than meritorious act intentions from the get-go. I was walking away from God, and I knew it. Even though I might say, hey, God, I'll be back tomorrow. Promise, but I'm going to go do this thing right now.
Listening to you, I was also thinking of. Okay. Listening to you, I thought also of what Tony was talking about, in that, in terms of joy and celebration, which I really like more than happiness. And I think people have always made provisions and done things so that they could celebrate, so they could feel joyousness. Even when times were really bad, you still carved out that moment when you could celebrate, where you could honor what is good, the marriage, the birth of a child, the accomplishment of whatever it is, of celebrating a milestone accomplished. And I think that spirit is, in essence, an undeniable and important part of the human condition.
Yeah, I very much, like, I value your comments on missing the mark, because it leads to consideration of what do you do next? And so much of progress in all fronts has come from missing the mark. It's that's how you learn. You only learn through failure and adversity. And missing the mark tells you some things about how to hit something close to the mark at some other time, but it's vital. Absolutely.
Well, it's, during the service and particularly during Yom Kippur, we're very repentant. And I think that obviously that's a very good thing to look at that accounting. But I also want to celebrate, in a way, the good things that we do on a daily basis during the year. And it's sort of bringing balance to life. And in doing so, I would hope that would sort of stimulate even a greater effort to do more of those positive things. So that's what I'm talking about. And it's also that self-criticism, which, thank you, Kim, for that story about your uncle. It makes so much sense. But sometimes we're so critical of ourselves that we don't realize that goodness. And I think we need to examine both. And if we are really truly created in the image of God, part of that is that goodness and sharing that goodness. And that's why I would like to think that sometimes we really do hit the mark.
Now I'm thinking it brings hope. Your point brings hope to me in this moment. And
Good.
it allows me to rise up and say, there is hope. I can do it. I can be better. I can do it. And it's necessary.
Well, I think that whole positive reinforcement, let's do more of these things that were really beneficial to everybody in our community or to our families. So not only, looking at the ways in which we may have sort of not hit it, let's look at the ways that we did hit it and continue that. And that's what in talking about Tikkun Olam, that's what we're commanded to do. And I'd like to celebrate that as much as saying, I haven't you know, I haven't hit where I wanted to be. And so that was the whole point of that.
Yeah, beautiful to remember. Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, fixing begins. Many of our rabbinic scholars would argue with ourselves. Right? We have to be working on our inward journey in order to better ourselves, in order to be of better service to the world around us.
What you said made me think of what we think of as true humility. We think of humility as, oh, I'm no good. I'm not, But true humility is not only knowing your weaknesses, but knowing your strengths as well, knowing your purposes. And I think you expressed that very beautifully.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to chime in? Yes?
To Avram and I talked about that feeling of not being enough that permeates our culture in some ways. And, like I would do something and my mother would say, well, it wasn't, it's not enough, or this is, so that like looking at things through that lens is something that I don't want to keep doing. And so that's how we started talking about,
I think that's a really important part of communication, is to give positive reinforcement. And if there's something that needs, you observe maybe a place where something might be tweaked, it's at least I find that here in the American culture, right? Not so much in Israel, they'll go straight to, no, that's no good. You've got to do it this way, right? So you got to kind of get used to that. But I think in the American culture, and it's sincere, right? Though sometimes we just forget. It's nice to appreciate, to express, appreciation, gratefulness over something that's been done for us, and focus on the good. Great. So we're going to get that Darash also sent to us electronically, and we'll find out from Tricia how we're going to make that accessible to everybody, either on our website or, and also since we're recording all of the Zooms this year, we'll probably, I think Ari, you said, if we send you the Zoom link, you can snip and have the different Darashes up and various parts of our service. So it's all coming. We're entering the 21st century, little by little. Yeshar koach. Thanks.